Why do markets form? Why do we have money? Questions about wealth, innovation, and resource allocation can be explored through markets. I'm Professor Min Sok Lee, and this is Economics for Everyone. When we think about markets, we naturally focus on buyers and sellers exchanging goods. But we never stop and think about why do we have these arrangements via markets. So in today's lesson, we'll get deeper and trying to learn about the magical power behind markets. Let's say we randomly drop 500 individuals in a deserted island with nothing else except their bare hands. What do you think they will focus first? Food, water, shelter, and maybe clothing. Fast forward a few months. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the islanders realize, you know what? I'm really good at gathering and harvesting food, while others may be better at finding sources of water, and even others might be better at building shelter. Fast forward a few years, maybe decades. We shouldn't be surprised if they have come to an arrangement where maybe they meet in the market square so that they can exchange these goods. Some people will focus their attention on food and go to the market square and in exchange obtain water, shelter, and maybe clothing. This simple thought experiment captures the essence of the economics behind trade and comparative advantage, and why economists love markets so much. So now we'll focus on markets as drivers of wealth, innovation, and efficient allocators of resources. In other words, we'll focus on why markets are so great. Let's go back to our example of the island. And for a second, let's just assume there's no market square. In other words, individuals cannot exchange goods for the other. In that situation, each one of the 500 individuals needs to spend time getting food, water, and shelter. But what happens if one person is really bad at gathering food? So that person maybe has to spend 20 hours a day just to find enough food to survive. For other people, that might be true for water, shelter. So we're facing a situation where the island is facing starvation, famine, no shelter. But let's bring the market square back in. Now the individuals are able to specialize on those tasks where they have the comparative advantage, and then go to the market to exchange that good for all the other goods they need. So markets have allowed us to address the problem of starvation, famine, and no shelter. Markets are the source of wealth. Let's say you're really good at gathering food, but you need some clothing. So you go to the market to get some clothing in exchange of food. But what happens if the person who has clothing to sell doesn't need any food? That person needs shelter. Then that exchange will not happen unless you find someone who has clothing to sell but needs precisely food. In this context, you can see how organically you can see the rise of money as a medium exchange. Why? Because money is what allows us to convert food into dollars and then dollars to whatever good that I need. So even though this example is very simple, it's quite realistic and matches history, where we can explain and justify the rise of money as medium of exchange. There's this islander, and she realizes that she's really good at building tools that makes the activity of gathering food and building shelters more productive. Those in the business of gathering food and building shelter love her tools. Why? Because it makes them more productive. So this is another critical role of markets. It rewards creativity and entrepreneurship. Indeed, markets are the source of innovation. But when you think about true innovations that we have come up as a society, personal computers, software, smartphones, tablets, electric vehicles, all these are examples where markets have rewarded the creators of these products. Let's go back to the example of the island. And let's say my comparative advantage is to gather food and water. So I spend all my hours gathering food and water. I take those to the market and exchange them for shelter and clothing. But let's say that one year there's this severe drought and all of a sudden the price of water goes up. In other words, for every gallon of water, I'm able to get more units of clothing, more units of shelter. As an optimizer, what would be my reaction? I should be spending more time gathering water and probably less time gathering food. So this is another key role of markets. Via prices, it provides the information so that individuals, firms, sellers can better allocate the resources. What resources? In our example, is our time. Let's say society values STEM majors more, and they signal this by giving them a higher salary after graduation from college. So what would be the effect of this higher salary on high school students who go to college and they have to decide on a major? Because of this signal, on the margin, more college students will pick STEM as the major. That's a better allocation of resources. Let's say that the islanders have elected you as the supreme leader. And as a benevolent leader, you want to make them as happy as possible. So you want to tell them how they should be spending their time producing what type of good. Also, you want to distribute those goods to those people who value the most. How would you go about solving this complicated problem? You might realize that if you knew all the skill set of all those 499 individuals, what they're good at, what they're bad at, if you knew the preferences of those individuals, what they like, what they dislike. But if you had all this information, you might be able to solve this very complicated problem. Instead, what you have learned in this lesson is that you can organize your island via markets. Now, you know about the magical power behind markets. Organizing our economies via markets has been an enormous source of wealth, innovation, and efficient allocation of our resources. This is a critical insight that is now in your toolkit because economics is for everyone.